Hi, I am Dr. Arsalan and today we are going to discuss the female reproductive system. In this lecture, we will cover all the aspects of female reproductive system, including the structures and functions of each and every organ of the female reproductive system, starting from the ovaries, oviduct, uterus, cervix, vagina, and the external portion of the reproductive tract, the vulva. All of these organs we will explain in this lecture. So the first one is ovary. Ovaries are paired organs, as you see in the diagram that these two are the ovaries. So these are paired gonads. Ovary. Ovaries contain tiny sac-like structures called Graafian follicles on it, and ovaries are held with the ligaments, are attached with the ligaments to the uterus. So these are the ligaments which attach the ovaries to the uterus. Ovaries are basically paired gonads. These are two in number and the gonads are female reproductive organs. These are the primary reproductive organs as the ovaries produce ova. Ovaries are almond shaped. Their length ranges from 3 to 5 centimeter is their length and 2 to 3 centimeter is width. So length ranges from 3 to 5 centimeter and width ranges 2 to 3 centimeter. Ovaries flank the uterus and held with the ligaments. As I told you that ovaries are held or attached to the uterus by ligaments in the peritoneal cavity or peritoneal space of the body. These flank the uterus on either side and both sides the ovaries are attached to the uterus. Basically, ovaries have two functions. The primary function is ova formation and the secondary function is the formation of hormones. Ovaries produce ova as well as hormones. There are two types of structure present on the ovaries, the Graafian follicle and the corpus luteum. Basically, ovaries, as you know that ovaries are almond shaped and they have tiny sac-like structures. These tiny structures are called Graafian follicles. There are few hundred Graafian follicles on each ovary, and these Graafian follicles release a hormone called estrogen. As we have said that the ovaries also release hormone as their secondary function. So the Graafian follicles release estrogen. Each Graafian follicle has immature oocyte in it. Immature oocyte is present in the each Graafian follicle. Then a hormone, the follicle stimulating hormone, is released from the pituitary gland. Follicle stimulating hormone from the pituitary gland is released. This hormone, it has receptors on the follicles, and this pituitary gland secretion, follicle stimulating hormone, triggers the development and growth of a single follicle, and one of the follicles enlarges in size. This is called growth of the Graafian follicle. Along with it, the immature oocyte is also matured and developed. So the Graafian follicle is now ready with the ripened ova in it. Then the pituitary gland releases another hormone called luteinizing hormone, LH. When the LH is released, this Graafian follicle is ruptured. Rupture of this Graafian follicle releases the ova. When the ova is released from the Graafian follicle, this process is called ovulation. So the release of ova from the Graafian follicle by the rupture of Graafian follicle through luteinizing hormone, this is called ovulation. After ovulation, this ruptured portion of the Graafian follicle, it is converted into corpus luteum. Now this ruptured Graafian follicle after release of the ova is called corpus luteum, and corpus luteum secretes progesterone, the another hormone, progesterone. This was the function of ovary, in which the ovary released the ova as well as produced two kind of hormones, the estrogen from the Graafian follicle and progesterone from the corpus luteum. Second part of the female reproductive tract is oviduct. It's also called fallopian tube. It is the initial or very first part of the duct system of female reproductive tract. It starts from the ovary and penetrates the uterus. Basically, the oviduct or fallopian tube carries the ova to the uterus. The fallopian tube or oviduct is 10 centimeter long and it is the site of fertilization. Duct or fallopian tube is 10 centimeter long. Its length is 10 centimeter. Fallopian tube or oviduct has three parts. The initial structure of the oviduct is called infundibulum. It is the first part. The second portion of the oviduct is called ampulla, and the last terminal portion is called isthmus. So it has three parts: the infundibulum, ampulla and isthmus. Infundibulum being cup-shaped structure of the ovary, it catches the ova released from the ovary. The second portion, ampulla, it carries the ova towards the uterus, and at the junction of ampulla and isthmus, this is the site of fertilization in which ova is penetrated with the sperm. So this is the site of fertilization. The fertilization also occurs in the oviduct, and more specifically the fertilization occurs at the junction of ampulla and isthmus part of the oviduct. And when this fertilization occurs, this formation of zygote is mitotically divided into 2 and then 4 and then 8 cells forming embryo. So embryo formation also occurs in the oviduct or fallopian tube, and is carried towards the uterus for implantation and further development. So basically the oviduct, it has many functions. The first part of the oviduct, catching the ova released from the ovary, then it carries the ova. At the site of fertilization, the ova is fertilized by the sperm. This zygote is mitotically divided into embryo, and this embryo is carried towards the uterus. So this is the function of oviduct. Moreover, the oviduct has inside lining of muscular sheets. Muscular sheets are lined on the inside of the oviduct. Muscular sheets have again 2 lining of cells. The one is ciliated cell, the other is non-ciliated cell. The cells which have cilia on their surfaces are called ciliated cells, and the cells which do not have cilia on their surface are called non-ciliated cells. They have different type of functions. Ciliated cells propel the ova towards the uterus, so it helps in the movement of ova, while non-ciliated cells produce hormones and chemicals for the moistening and nourishing of the ova, or more specifically fertilized ova. So ciliated cells help in the movement and propulsion of the ova in the oviduct. Non-ciliated cells produce chemicals, hormones and nutritive products for the nourishment and moistening of the fertilized ova, so that the ova may not die during the travel in the oviduct. Third part is uterus. This is the uterus. This whole structure, starting from the oviduct up to the cervix, this is called uterus. Uterus is also called womb. Uterus lies between the rectum and urinary bladder in the pelvic cavity. Pelvic cavity, uterus is lying just behind the urinary bladder and interior to the rectum. So it is positioned between the rectum and urinary bladder in the pelvic cavity of the female. The uterus, as you see in the diagram, it seems to be inverted pear-shaped structure. The size and shape of the uterus is just like inverted pear. Uterus is hollow as it has space in it for the development of fetus. Thick-walled muscular made up of smooth muscles, and glandular organ as it produces uterine milk in it for the development and growth of the embryo. So it is also a glandular organ. The uterus receives, retain and nourish the embryo. As you stated that the oviduct, it delivers an embryo to the uterus if it is being fertilized by the sperm. The uterus receives this embryo. Embryo is received by the uterus. It is nourished by nutritive milk or uterine milk, and it is implanted. The embryo is implanted in the uterus. This implantation is necessary for the development of fetus. So it receives, retain and nourish the embryo. Basically, uterus has 3 layers. The outermost layer, this layer is called perimatrium. Perimatrium is the outermost protective layer made up of epithelial cells. Then there is thick muscular layer called myometrium. Myometrium is made up of smooth muscles, and these muscles help in the contraction and relaxation during the delivery process for the expulsion of fetus. And the final layer is internal layer called endometrium. This endometrium has 2 functions. First of all, it attaches the embryo to the internal lining called implantation, and the second one, it is glandular. It produces the nutritive uterine milk for the development and nourishment of the embryo. So these are the 3 layers of the uterus: the perimetrium, myometrium and endometrium. The fourth component is cervix. Cervix lies between the uterus and vagina. This is the cervix. Cervix is Latin word. Cervix means neck, as it is the neck of uterus. So this is called cervix. It is 2 to 3 centimeter long. The length of the cervix is 2 to 3 centimeter. It has 2 openings or os. Os means opening. The internal opening are internal os and the external opening are external os. Internal opening or internal os is towards the uterus and external os is towards the vagina. It has finger-like projections, the muscular flaps which guard the cervix. Cervix is basically narrow entrance from vagina to uterus. During copulation intercourse, the sperm travels through the vagina, crossing the cervix. So it is a narrow entrance towards the uterus. It is usually plugged with the mucus so that the microbes from the vaginal colonies may not penetrate or enter the uterus and may not cause endometritis or uterine infections. So God has protected the uterus and the internal reproductive organs by cervix so that the microbial colonies and other infectious organisms may not penetrate the cervix and travel to the internal reproductive organ. So it is usually plugged with the mucus, and sperm has the capability to cross this mucus plug by dissolving the mucus layer and travel towards the uterus and oviduct. Fifth part of the female reproductive tract is vagina. This portion is the vagina. It is also called birth canal. It is 8 to 10 centimeter long, thin walled and long tube extending from the cervix to the outside environment. So it is the long tube, tubular organ which extends from the cervix and opens to the outside environment. So between the cervix and outside environment there is long thin walled muscular tube or birth canal called vagina. Vagina has three primary functions. The entry of spermatozoa while sexual intercourse, the sperms penetrate the cervix and uterus via vagina. The expulsion of fetus during delivery process, when there is delivery or birth of the fetus, then the fetus is expelled through the vagina, and this is also called vaginal birth. And third one is menstrual flow. If the ova is not fertilized, then this endometrial layer is shedded from the uterus along with the unfertilized ova. This is called menstruation, and so this blood flow during menstruation is also facilitated through this vagina. Vulva is the last portion or part of the female reproductive system. It is the external visible part of female reproductive system, and it has two openings. The anterior opening bearing urethra and lower opening is the vagina. So the external visible part, this is called vulva, having two openings. The anterior opening, it is embedded with urethra for urine, because the urinary tract and reproductive tract are being separated. It is anteriorly located on the vulva, and the vaginal os is located on the lower side of the vulva. Hope you'll find this video helpful in clearing your concepts regarding female reproductive system. Thank you.